How much do we let our runs get affected by the strength training? Where's that balance? This is the second long run of my training program, and it's harder for two reasons. First, it's a little bit longer. So today is 2 hours 40. Last week was 2 hours 30, so an extra 10 minutes. And the second reason it's harder is for my first long run, I came into it as the first session of the training program and a little bit fresher. I had a few easy days leading into it, so it was easy to get through that run. This time, I've got a week of solid training behind me. In fact, I've got 8 days of solid training behind me. Did a strength session yesterday, so even though I'm somewhat recovered, I'm not fully recovered. So I'm carrying a bit of accumulated fatigue in the legs. And that makes this run just that little bit harder. Today's wet and it's quite cool. In fact, it's raining at the moment, not heavy. As a result, the trails are going to be muddy, which is why I've got my trail shoes on. I've got my rain jacket. It's a Ron Hill Tempest. And of course, I've got water for the day and Hammer Perpetuum made up for the run for my nutrition. It's pretty much it. And today's run, off through the trails, into Plenty Gorge, get a bit of a warm up on these trails, across a couple of roads, then I'm off in the bush. And now that it's summer down here, I'm going to make the most of any mild day or wet day to get in there, because for most of summer the fire danger is up pretty high and it's not a place you want to be if there's a fire. So feeling the effects of the strength training going into a long run brings up an important point, and a constant struggle that pretty much every runner has, especially when you're adding in strength training, is what's the point where we're getting the benefit from the strength training and enough benefit in the run? Let's explore those questions. One is, how much strength training do you need? How much can you sacrifice training run performance? Where in your program should you do your strength training? The further out you are from your goal race, the more emphasis you can put on the strength training and let the running feel like it suffers just that little bit. You don't need to be running your fastest long runs when you're a long way out. You just need to be covering the distance, getting that low intensity done. As a rule, the runs that I'm happy for the strength training to impact on or to pull your performance down a bit are your long runs, easy runs, and tempo runs. Those runs are more about the intensity, a bit of time on your feet, and not necessarily about hitting exact paces. Your body still has an internal load, so you're still working at the right intensities. It's just that with the fatigue from the strength training and your other training, the end pace might be just reduced a bit. But you know what? When you're out from your race, when your week's out, that's absolutely fine. The runs that you don't want the strength training to impact on, the runs that you want to feel fresh for, are your interval runs, your key fast sessions. These are the runs where you're going to push your limits. They're the runs where you want your connective tissue, your ligaments, your tendons to be ready to handle the training that you're going to throw at it. They're the runs that you don't want to do some hard strength training just beforehand. How much strength training do we need to do? Or put another way, how strong do we need to be for our running? Unfortunately, there's no exact answer to that question, but there's a concept I like to follow in this. You want to be strong enough, conditioned enough to not just be able to handle the run training you do, but you want to be strong and conditioned enough that when you do that hard run training, you adapt to it and it builds you up. You don't just survive it or even break down from it. How do we schedule the strength training in our program? First and foremost, you've got to work out when you can fit it in. And there might be some ideal times to do the strength training in terms of when you position your runs and your key runs, but sometimes it's just not possible. Sometimes you have to do it when you have access to the equipment or just when you have the time. That's one of the main driving forces for myself. Don't be too caught up in getting the schedule exactly right. There's no 100% correct way of doing it, and doing something is better than nothing in strength training. In terms of scheduling a strength training session on the same day as a run, the preference is to have the strength training after the run. That way you still get most of the benefit of the strength training, but without impacting the run. If you have to do it the other way around, you have to do it the other way around. When you do your strength training after running, there's two approaches you could take. One is to get straight into that strength training after a run. You might need a carbohydrate and protein drink in between. That way you're already warmed up and it's quite time efficient. The other one, if you're going to delay it, and this is probably closer to the gold standard, is give yourself at least 3 hours in between the run and the strength training. Have some food after your run, recover, and you're starting a new session. Now, if my schedule allowed it, that would be my gold approach. Put the strength training in later in the day. So a morning run, and then at least 3 hours later, do the strength training. But I have a full-time job, I've got family, I've got other commitments. So my usual go-to is I get straight into that strength training after the run. You might not hit as greater numbers in the weight room, but does that really matter? You're still loading the tissues. You're still reaching probably a similar level of fatigue. You're still creating that stimulus to get stronger. The cold of the rain is actually quite pleasant. Makes a nice reprieve from all the hot runs that have been happening over the last couple of weeks. I'd say it doesn't feel like summer, but then again, even though I'm out in this rain, it doesn't feel too cold. No need for the jacket. Now, as you get closer to your key race, you probably should think about how much strength training you are doing and what the load is. Now, the good news is it takes more work to reach a certain level than it does to maintain that level. So the advantage is maybe from about 4 weeks out from your key race, you can reduce your strength training. So whether that be you reduce it from 2 sessions a week down to 1, or you reduce how much you do in each session. Either way, do enough to maintain the load, to maintain the gains you've already made over the previous weeks, but allow yourself to recover and be fresh for the key runs and for your race. Now, when you strength train too, you're not just training the muscles, you're training the bones, the connective tissue, so the tendons and ligaments, all of which contributes to running and also your lifelong health. As you get older, your tendons can be quite a weak point, and they do require some strength training. And what tendons tend to really respond to are heavy loads, so heavy weights, and time under tension. Of course, lighter loads for more reps are also beneficial in a slightly different way, and maybe not quite as effective. Also, you want some fast movements in there as well, and some plyometrics, some skipping, some hopping. So if we look at it this way, if you want to be complete, put in some heavy loads, some fast movements, and some plyometrics. But in the end, do some strength training. It will greatly benefit your running. It will benefit the rest of your life. And we look at it this way. You want to be fit enough to run, not just run to get fit.